welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
This is Jessica with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast, and this is a pretty cool episode because the author we're speaking to is literally all the way around the world. So please tell us, first of all, who you are, where you are recording from, and about your latest book.
So my name's Charlottle McConaghy, and I am the author of Migrations and Once There Were Wolves. And I'm speaking to you from a sunny Sydney morning in Australia.
Excellent.
Pleasure to chat. Once There Were Wolves is the story of Inti Flynn, who's a scientist who is charged with reintroducing wolves into the Scottish Highlands in order to rewild the landscape there. And she faces a lot of pushback from the locals, who are mostly a farming community. It's a love story, it's a murder mystery, it's a story of connecting with nature, and I think not just rewilding landscapes, but also rewilding ourselves.
Yeah, and I've been to the Scottish Highlands, by the way, which is one of my absolute favorite places in the world. And I mean, to write a book about rewilding ourselves, that is one of the perfect places to write. With the setting. So the first line of the book is by far one of the most beautiful and jarring things I've ever read. And I don't want that to put off readers because it is fabulous, but it's one of those first lines that literally grabs you by the jugular and keeps you going.
It's full on, isn't it?
It really is. It's like gloves are off the minute you open this book and you're going to start feeling things. Inti has a really interesting connection with how what she experiences and her senses. And I would like to ask you to tell the listeners a little bit about it, because I had to look it up. I'd been aware of other forms of this
synesthesia.
Exactly, synesthesia beforehand, but I've never encountered anything regarding what Inti experiences. So please tell us a little bit about it and where you first discovered it.
Yeah, sure. So Inti has a condition called mirror touch synesthesia, which is a very rare but very real condition, even though it actually seems kind of like magic in a way. It means that the physical sensations that she sees, her brain tells her body that she's feeling those sensations herself. So if I had it and I watched you get slapped in the face, I would feel that slap, the sting of it on my own cheek. So it means that she has this very overwhelming connection to everyone and everything around her. I kind of saw it as this very intense form of empathy in a way. And I think, it's something that as a child she kind of loves because she's able to see it as a gift of connection. But as she grows older, she starts to see it for the danger that it represents to her. It makes her quite vulnerable. And so I kind of thought that this was a condition that was sort of perfect in a way in a book about empathy, or the lack of empathy, and what that does to people and what it causes people to do to each other. And it was a condition that I learnt about a few years ago. It was actually on an Invisibilia podcast, which is an NPR program, a really great show about a lot of scientific stuff. And I just couldn't believe it was real, and knew that one day I had to write a character with it.
Did you speak to anybody at all who experiences it?
No, it's so rare. I couldn't find anyone. I just read accounts. So there's first person accounts out there, and people who've written books of their experiences. So I just kind of read up about it and then kind of imagined my way into it. I have a mild form of synesthesia, which is not mirror touch, but it basically means that my memory is tied to color and texture and shape. So I guess I kind of had a vague sense of seeing and thinking about things slightly differently, which prepared me.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I think it's one of those things where people don't realize that there's anything different about it.
Exactly.
It's just how they've
Yeah.
always experienced
Yeah.
their senses. So another thing that I just loved about this book was the connection to, like, from humanity to animal, and what makes something worth saving, what makes something, I guess, animalistic, because Inti is very connected with these wolves. She wants nothing more than to save them, and people don't look at them as necessarily a positive thing, but people in the book were in so many ways more savage than the animals.
Yeah, totally. And that was I guess that was my intention from the start. When I started learning about wolves, I've always kind of loved them in a sense of, in a fairy tale sense, I guess, in a way. Love that they're sort of so formidable and beautiful, but I didn't know too much about their power, essentially. So when I was researching, I was kind of amazed to discover the impact that they have on everything around them. They're a keystone species, which means that they have a trickle-down effect on all the other species and ecology in their environment. They can literally bring forests back to life and change the course of rivers. So they're essential things to have, as all predators are. And as I started to see them this way, it was really sort of shocking to see the treatment that they've received over, centuries by humans, and really strange, because we see them as monsters, but in fact, they're very shy, family-oriented creatures who are terrified of humans, far more frightened of us than we are of them. And it threw into really stark contrasts that the behavior that we have displayed is so much worse than anything that they've done over the years. And it kind of really highlighted to me that this book needed to kind of say that they're not the monsters we are.
I really loved the connection between the sisters and trauma, how that sort of played between the two of them. I loved that they were twins. There's a connection between siblings that are multiples that I don't think is possible to understand if you are not within that. And I say that not because I'm a twin myself, but because I have twins.
Do you?
I do.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, especially between the time that the world shut down in March 2020 and very recently when we started reintroducing them to the world because they were isolated. We kept them for remote school the whole year. There's just something very interesting about the way that they communicate with each other. Was it when you decided to make Inti and Aggie twins, was there a specific connection in mind that you were looking to?
Yeah, definitely. It's something that I've always found really fascinating, that unknowable thing that passes between twins. And I really liked the idea that they would share something that separates them from the rest of the world, a secret, silent language, because to me that really represented the secret, silent language that wolves share, but also that trees share, that the whole kind of natural world has this beautiful harmony that it kind of exists within. And I think we are really separate from that, to our detriment. And so the twin thing, I really loved that they could, exist within this space, almost like a natural world of their own that was separate from other people. I thought it was beautiful.
It was perfect for just everything that happens in the story. And I think you bring up a really good point of the language of nature versus the language of humans. You know, humans try to harness nature more than understand it. And that is a narrative that I sort of picked up throughout the entire book. And I think Inti, in a way, you know, trying to almost like understand humans, because she was more nature minded.
Mhm.
And it was hard for her to sort of like be straddling both worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she's certainly someone who has a natural ability to connect with wild spaces and the wildness within herself. Her relationship with people is much more complicated. I think we see a kind of journey for her. She starts out as a child, as I mentioned, very open, very empathetic, easily able to kind of see the best in people. And that's something I think that she gets from her father, who is kind of a naturalist, and he teaches her to believe in kindness and generosity and forgiveness. Whereas on the flip side of that, she's got this really tough-edged mother, who's a kind of crime detective in Sydney, and her mother is concerned for Inti's vulnerability because of her condition and because of her openness, and so teaches her to sort of protect herself, guard herself against people, because people hurt, they harm each other. That's sort of her philosophy, and she wants her daughter to toughen up. And so I think over the course of the book we sort of see these different phases of Inti, where she, you know, at the start of the book we meet her, something terrible's happened, something traumatic has happened to her and her sister, and she's really closed off from people. She's decided she can't trust them anymore. She's lost all faith in them, and it's really, I guess the book is more about her learning to open back up again, to take, I guess, inspiration from the love that wolves show each other, and to really kind of, I guess, be able to reconnect with trust and with other people, and to see the good in them again, despite, you know, witnessing the harm that they also do.
So how was writing this different than Migrations?
Well, I think Migrations was a lot slower, for one thing. It was a slow process of kind of a lot of the time not really knowing what it was and what I was writing about. And, you know, it was a process of discovery. I think it was a book that came from quite a sad place about, you know, what I could see was happening, what we were losing from the world, a lonely place. Whereas Wolves came to me really fast and, you know, sort of very passionately, and it became I think I was writing it from a place of anger more than anything else. I was really angry about all these things that I could see was happening. The slaughter of animals, the degradation of our kind of wild spaces, and the kind of lack of concern. But also on top of that, I was also feeling really angry about the violence emergency that happens. In Australia, we have this shocking problem with domestic violence, male violence against women. A woman is killed every week here, which doesn't account for any of the women who are surviving their ongoing abuse. So that was really making me very upset as well. And so I guess I was looking at the two things and trying to work out how they would work together in the narrative. And it came down to that theme again of empathy and lack of empathy. So I think this book for me was a real, I guess, just a fiery experience. And Inti became quite a fiery character who was a bit of a mouthpiece for that anger. And it was liberating to write a woman who was driven by anger and was not afraid to kind of exist within that space and not afraid to offend people anymore. She's kind of just had enough, really. And that was a really great thing to write. But it was also really nice to write her through that, to find some catharsis and healing from that.
So are you working on something for next year, or are you going to take a little bit of a breather?
I am. I do have a book project that I'm working on. I think it'll be a bit slower than, I won't be pumped. It won't be coming out in a year following this one, because that was quite a fast turnaround. It was quite an intense experience to write a book that quickly and edit it, and also I'm about to have a baby, so that will probably throw a bit of a
Congratulations! That's awesome.
But yes, I am working on a book. It's set on a sub-Antarctic island, about a little family of caretakers who are kind of looking after a very important seed bank down there. And a woman washes up on shore, and they don't really understand who she is or why she's there or where she's come from. So there's mystery around that. And I guess it'll be a story about the complexities of raising children in a dying world, and what we choose to save and why.
That sounds really lovely and sad at the same time. And it's very interesting. There's a lot of people who I speak to, and I guess yourself included, who see all of these things happening, but are like, but I'm going to have children in this world and work to make it better.
Yes.
Because that's, with all of our ability to harness technology and to study, there's got to be something we can put our big brain power to help. And I think it's very hopeful to have that and say, I'm aware that there's issues, but we're going to continue. We'll make this work, and we have the ability to change things for the better.
Yeah, I think you're right. There is something inherently hopeful about having kids at the moment.
Yeah.
I think we're the first generation who have ever questioned whether or not we should. And there's something really heartbreaking in that, I think. But as you say, it's kind of wonderful to embrace it and say, how do we leave them something that isn't a smoking ruin?
And how do we raise them in a way that they can respect what they have and introduce the next generation into the natural world? So
That's right.
Lovely. And so Migrations is out in paperback.
Yes, yeah.
And Once There Were Wolves will be out in hardcover, and it'll be available in your library and bookstores pretty much everywhere. And I definitely invite readers to just spend some time in Inti's mind, because it's very memorable.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. Our guest, joining us from halfway around the world in Sydney, Australia in the morning, it's evening here, is
Charlotte McConaghy.
and we are going to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.